Why is Goblin Piledriver never sad? Because he has protection from the blues.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. In today's game, Felix, Seb, and Max have all joined me again, and I'm testing out my new Commodore Guff deck. I keep Soul Ring, Steam Vents, Two Mountains, Nahiri the Harbinger, Chandra Torch of Defiance, and Forge of Heroes. Felix is taking out his oldie but goodie with Kamiz, keeping Arcane Signet, Mystic Remora, Counterspell, Island, Command Tower, and Two Swamps. Despite the fact that we're already in my basement, Seb wants to go into the dungeon with Sefris, keeping Two Swamps, Reliquary Tower, Sun Titan, Acerak the Archlich, Fleshbag Marauder, and a Marsh Flats. Last but not least, Max is playing Oswald, keeping Two Plains, Soul of New Phyrexia, Soul Ring, Mind Stone, Orbs of Warding, and a Felden's Cane. I win the die roll and start us off. I draw and play a tap Steam Vents. Felix plays an island and casts Mystic Remora. Seb plays and cracks a Marsh Flats for a tapped Hollowed Fountain and passes to Max. Max plays a Plains and casts Soul Ring, not paying the 4, so Felix gets to draw. Max then casts a Mind Stone and once more doesn't pay again. He then decides to feed Felix even further with a Felden's Cane and passes after that. I draw and play a Mountain. Felix pays for the Mystic Remora and draws for turn. He plays a Command Tower and then Wayfarer's Bauble and passes. Seb draws and plays a Swamp. They pass after that. Max has a Plains. He decides not to feed the fish this time around and instead plays creatures with a Giver of Runes and then Oswald and passes after that. I've just got an island and I pass. Felix lets the Remora go and draws for turn. He plays a Swamp and then casts Arcane Signet. He follows up with a Ledger Shredder and passes. Seb plays their Reliquary Tower, and then cast White Plume Adventurer and take the initiative. They go and find a basic to put to hand and pass after that. Max plays a Plains and then plays Orb of Warding. And once that's out, sacrifices the Mind Stone to Oswald's ability to tutor up an Archaeomancer's map and goes to find 2 Plains to put to hand. He then passes while searching for the basics. I draw and play a Mountain. I then play Soul Ring into a Chromatic Lantern now that the Remora is gone. Felix does still get to draw though from the Ledger Shredder trigger, and he discards Tymna to give the bird a +1/+1 counter, and I pass after that. Felix has a Swamp and casts Felwar Stone, and then casts Kamiz. This is his second spell per turn, and he gets to loot away a land this time thanks to the Ledger Shredder's Connive. Going to combat, Felix swings the Ledger Shredder at Seb and takes the initiative. Felix then enters the Undercity and he searches for a basic for his hand and passes. Seb's got a Plains for turn, and they go to combat, swinging the White Plume Adventurer at Felix, who takes the hit and Seb regains it. Seb then scries 2 as they move to the next room in the Undercity, and then casts Sefris in their second main phase. Seb gets to untap the White Plume Adventurer, and Max draws. He plays a Dreamstone Hedron, and then sacrifices the map to Oswald and goes to find a Solemn Simulacrum. With the Sad Robot entering, Max finds another Plains and passes. I draw and play Forge of the Heroes. I then play Chandra Torch of Defiance, upticking her for 2 red, and I use 1 of the red to help cast Gamble. I then find a card, put it to my hand, and discard an Oath of Gideon at random, and I pass turn. Felix draws and plays a Plains. He plays his own Soul Ring, and then casts an Archpriest of Shadows, backing up on Kamiz. He then sacrifices the Bauble and goes to find another Plains. Once he's done that, he moves to combat. Kamiz swings at Max, and Felix has it become unblockable, and he swings the Ledger Shredder at Chandra, giving a double strike. In response, I cast Teferi's Protection and save my Chandra, while Max takes 2. The Archpriest's backup brings back Tymna, and as Felix moves to a second main phase, he then loses 1 life to Tymna's ability to draw a card. With nothing else, Felix passes. Seb continues on their journey through the Undercity, making a treasure token and then drawing. They play an Urborg, and then evoke Muldrifter, which has them venturing once more into the Undercity with Sefris seeing it die. Seb then makes a 4/1 skeleton token, and then plays Aceract. This allows them to complete the dungeon, and Seb reveals the top 10 cards of their library, putting to field Brago, which comes in with 3+1+1 counters and a round of hexproof. Seb then also gets to reanimate the Muldrifter from completing the dungeon thanks to Sefris, drawing 2 as it comes in, and Seb then passes after that. Max draws and casts Soul of New Phyrexia. He then activates Oswald to sacrifice the Dreamstone Hedron, and goes to find a Sandstone Oracle, drawing 8 cards thanks to Seb. Max then plays a Plains for turn, before casting a Cosmos Elixir. He then moves to discard and passes to me. I phase back in and draw for turn. I play a Deep Glow Skate to double the amount of counters on Chandra, and use her ultimate to gain an emblem. I follow that up by casting Saheeli Sublime Artificer, and I get to deal 5 damage to the Archpriest of Shadows, and I pass after that. Felix plays Obscure Storehouse, which sacrifices itself and goes to find an island, and Felix gains a life. He follows up with the Ozolith and moves to combat. He swings the Ledger Shredder at me and Kamiz at Seb, making the Ledger Shredder connive and giving Kamiz double strike. We then both take the hits, with Felix regaining the initiative, and as he moves to the next room, he gets to scry 2. In his post-combat main phase, Felix then plays Austere Command, destroying all big creatures and all artifacts. Sefris triggers, and Seb goes into the dungeon the Mad Mage, with Max drawing a card from the Solemn Simulacrum dying. With nothing else, Felix passes. Seb draws and plays a Plains. They cast Sun Titan, bringing back the Marsh Flats, and then move to combat. They swing the Skeleton at Felix, the White Plume at Chandra, and Sefris at Max. Everyone declares no blocks, with Chandra getting taken out and everyone else taking their hits. Seb once more regains the initiative, and continues down the dungeon the Mad Mage, scrying 1. They pass after that. Max plays a Plains, and then casts his own Sun Titan, bringing back Soul Ring as it enters. He follows up with an Ichor Wellspring, drawing a card, and then sacrifices it to Oswald, drawing another card, and tutoring for a Mirage Mirror to put into play. He wraps things up with an Esper Sentinel, and passes. I draw, but don't hit a land, and I'm sadly stuck on only 2 colors because my Chromatic Lantern's gone. With nothing else to do, I have to pass. Felix draws and plays a Swamp. He then plays Rafine and moves to combat. He swings Timna at me and the Shredder at Seb, putting Rafine's trigger on Timna. Felix discards Alhamrad's Archive and Tainted Strike, giving Timna 2+1+1 counters, and Seb and I then both take 4. Felix regains the initiative again and makes a treasure token, and in his post-combat main phase, casts Consecrated Sphinx. Seb draws and Felix draws 2. They then crack the Marsh Flats for a Plains, and once that's done, cast Demonic Tutor. They then play Cabal Coffers and play out Hammam Pashar, and follow that up with a Ravenloft Adventurer, regaining the initiative to venture even further. After that, Seb plays a Fleshbag Marauder, and everyone sacrifices a creature, with the creatures being sacrificed exiled from the Ravenloft Adventurer. Max sacrifices the Esper Sentinel, and Felix loses Timna, while Seb scries 2 twice from venturing with Sefris, and gets a second room trigger from Hammam Pashar. Going to combat, Seb swings Sun Titan and the Skeleton at Felix, bringing back the Marsh Flats with the Sun Titan trigger. Felix double blocks the Skeleton, and Seb trades with Rafine, and it gets exiled with the Ravenloft Adventurer. After that, Seb passes. Max has a Plains for turn, and then plays Tragic Arrogance. I'm unaffected by it, while Felix loses the Consecrated Sphinx, Seb loses everything but the White Plume Adventurer, and Max keeps his Sun Titan and Mirage Mirror. Max then activates the Mirage Mirror to make it a copy of Sun Titan, and swings 1 at Felix and 1 at Seb. He brings back the Soul Ring and Archaeomancer's map, and both Seb and Felix take the hits. In his post-combat main phase, Max then casts Sevine's Reclamation, bringing back the Ichor Wellspring, which draws a card as it enters. Once he's done that, he replays Oswald and passes to me. I draw, play an island, but still don't have access to white mana, so I can't do anything. Felix draws and plays Duelist Heritage. We also realize at this point that Max should have gotten the initiative, so he goes and tutors for a Plains. He then casts Swords to Plowshares on the Sun Titan to trigger the Ledger Shredder, and once that's done, follows up with a Chasm Skulker. Moving to combat, Felix swings the bird at Max and gives it double strike. He takes 8, and Felix takes back the initiative, making a 4/1 skeleton token. He then passes after that. Seb draws and plays an island. They activate Cabal Coffers using some of the mana to recast Sefris, and then replay Acerak to venture, and they get to exile their top 2 cards from the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Seb reveals an Azorius Signet and Callous Blood Mage, and casts both of them, with the Blood Mage exiling Max's graveyard as it enters. Seb then moves to combat and swings the White Plume Adventurer at Max, and Felix gives it double strike. Max takes 6, and after combat, Seb plays Urian to flicker their team. Moving to their end step, Seb's creatures return, and they get to venture again, scrying 3 from the dungeon, and then drawing 1 and losing 1 from the Blood Mage, and they pass to Max. Max draws and plays a Plains. He casts Triplicate Titan and activates Oswald once it's out to sacrifice the Soul Ring and go and find Lightning Greaves. He then activates the Mirage Mirror, having it become a copy of the Triplicate Titan. And once that's done, equips the Lightning Greaves onto the one that just came in this turn, and goes to combat. He swings both Titans at Seb, and Seb soaks up 5 of the damage by blocking with Urian, and takes the rest. Seb also completes a dungeon from a creature dying, which draws them 3, and lets them put out a Radiant Solar for free. Seb then reanimates Sun Titan with Sefris, which brings back Hamashar with it. And Seb gets to restart the Dungeon of the Mad Mage with the double room triggers as the Radiant Solar sees them coming in. This has them gaining 2, scrying 1 twice, and then creating 2 treasure tokens. After all that, Max passes. I draw and play Tezzeret's Gambit, dealing 5 to Max for my Chandra emblem and drawing 2. I proliferate on Saheeli as well, and finally hit a white source with a Hallowed Fountain, which I play untapped and take 2. I then finally cast Commodore Guff, dealing another 5 to Max. And downtick Guff to deal 2 to each of my opponents and draw 2. After that, I put a counter onto Saheeli from Guff on my end step and pass to Felix. Felix draws and plays a Swamp. He overloads a Cyclonic Rift, which sadly resolves. Going to combat, he swings everything at Max, giving the Chasm Skulker double strike, and Max responds to that trigger by casting Path to Exile on it. Max then takes the other 8, and Felix gets a basic land and puts it into play tapped. He then completes the Undercity, and of the 10 cards, he gets to put out a Blightsteel Colossus with 3 more +1/+1 counters, not to mention have hexproof until his next turn. He's pretty happy with this, and passes to Seb. Seb draws and plays a Plains. They activate the Cabal Coffers for a bunch of black mana, replaying Sefris and the Azorius Signet. They then play the Radiant Solar, scrying 2 from the dungeon, and then play Hamashar, venturing again and exiling their top 2 twice. From among those 4, Seb then plays Barrowin of Clan Undur and completes the dungeon, drawing 3 and playing Sir Conrad for free. And then drawing another 3 and playing a Plaguecrafter for free. Felix sacrifices the skeleton token, Seb sacrifices this Plaguecrafter, and Max and I have to discard a card. Seb also has a Sefris trigger from completing the dungeon, reanimating Brago. We then all lose 2 from Sir Conrad, and Seb restarts the Dungeon of the Mad Mage with 5 more venture triggers, with each room being doubled. Seb then gets to flicker from Fate from exiling their top 2, and casts it on Barrowin to continue venturing, and completes the dungeon again. This time around, Seb casts a Sign in Blood, targeting me from among their top 3. And then cast Fate's Reversal to venture again. Seb's second final room trigger then gets them an eerie interlude to flicker their entire team. Once that's done, they go to their end step. All the creatures re-enter, and they get 7 more venture triggers, allowing Seb to complete the Dungeon of the Mad Mage for the 3rd time. This allows them to play a Sepulchral Primordial and Baleful Strix from the final room triggers. And the Primordial reanimates the Deep Glow Skate and Menomai, which nets them another 4 venture triggers from all the creatures entering. Sadly, Seb isn't able to complete the dungeon for a 4th time though, and has to pass. Max draws and plays a Plains. He plays a Coveted Jewel to draw 3, and then recasts Mirage Mirror and Lightning Greaves. He follows up with Oswald again, and moves the Greaves onto him. And then plays Prismatic Lens, and then Shadow Spear. With nothing else, he passes. I draw and play a Reflecting Pool, and then deploy the Gatewatch, revealing my top 7, but sadly only hitting Chandra, Acolyte of Flame. I do at least get to deal 5 to Felix with the Chandra emblem, but with nothing else, have to pass. Felix gets a Swamp from the Undercity trigger, and then draws for turn. He then plays it, and recasts Kamiz. Going to combat, Felix makes the Blightsteel unblockable, and swings it at Seb, and the Ledger Shredder goes at Max. Seb is ready though now that it doesn't have hexproof, and uses Path to Exile to save themselves, exiling the Blightsteel Colossus. Sadly, Max dies to the double striking Ledger Shredder, and after that, Felix has to pass. Seb draws, and with their massive board and very food blockers, Felix and I know when we're done, and scoop it up. Game review time. This game was 1 hour, 28 minutes, and 43 seconds. And it was a lot of fun. I think everyone's deck except for mine got to actually showcase and do what it does, and Felix's Kamiz deck is just brutal. I love how even small creatures near the end got really powerful, like that Ledger Shredder, which is only a 1/2, was dealing between 8 and 10 points of damage per swing. That's just brutal. Plus Kamiz works really well with something as powerful as Blightsteel Colossus, although some people would argue it probably didn't even need the unblockable. I have never seen a dungeon deck go off as hard as Seb's Sefris deck did. They did so many dungeons on that last turn, it was incredible. I know it's very obvious that by doing things over and over again you get a lot of value, but my goodness did the dungeons and Undercity provide so much for this game. I actually really like the initiative as a mechanic, and I think it's actually better than Monarch. Max's Oswald deck actually got to be a birthing pod for artifacts, and we got to see a decent amount of his deck. Unfortunately, he was very susceptible to any kind of removal, which I think is intentional, since he doesn't want the deck to be purely based around combo or going off too fast. Speaking of things that don't go off fast, my deck really struggled as soon as I lost the Chromatic Lantern. I was just lacking any source of white, and in hindsight, I may have used that Teferi's Protection a little too impulsively. I didn't necessarily need the Chandra emblem, I just really wanted it, and I think that clouded my judgment. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.